Good morning, Guruji.
How are you?
I'm fine, thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me back for a second episode of our meetings. And I'd like to start, if I may, following on from something that Centurion mentioned at our satsang on Saturday last week. And what came to me was two lines from my favorite poem, which is called If by Rudyard Kipling. And it is, if you can hear the truth you've spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools. And I think one of the things that Centurion said was that there were certain situations of injustice or ill discipline that rang his bells, and he wondered how to cope with it. And that very much resonated with me. And I wonder if you could expand a little bit on that topic for me, please.
Adam, life will throw situations and challenges at us. And that's part of what life has to make us see. We've got to acknowledge that life will present itself in all its varieties. All situations may not be to our liking. Some have to come to test us, to see how far we have understood who we truly are. Because our responses come from our understanding of who we truly are and what is our relationship with others. And this whole idea of right and wrong stems from that because as God created this beautiful creation, He created life as it is. And gave us a very beautiful thing called as a mind. Through our mind, we created in us the idea of the right and wrong and the good and bad, the dharma and the adharma. And all our lives, we are trying to take sides and we are trying to figure out for ourselves where we stand on this scales of right and wrong, this justice and injustice. How do we view it? How do we disengage from it? Do we engage in it? And if we engage in it, how do we engage in it? And I guess that's what Santuran was talking about, that when it happened, he suddenly realized for the first time the awareness that he was carrying that was allowed him to see what it was without getting disturbed by it, without reacting to it. And that allowed him to do what he realized he must do. And that's what I think is what you're asking, that when we are faced with something which is grossly and overtly incorrect or wrong or adharmic or unrighteous, what do we do? We must, at that point of time, not get sucked into it and react immediately, but see it as, first of all, that it is a test for us.
Right.
Right? And that comes with awareness. I know sometimes we are just impulsively, walk into it and say and do things which we might regret later. But the whole idea is that we see it as something which is coming to figure out how much have we walked up the ladder, how much has our consciousness been lifted. And when we recognize it like that, we are able to see it for what it is without getting our emotions involved in it, without getting the unnecessary hysteria and anger and those emotions around it. So you see it without getting involved in it. And that is when truly you can do justice to that situation. That is when you can, from the stillness of your heart, without being swayed by the emotions that the heart creates or the mind creates, actually, we do what we have to do, but we cut out the emotions out of it, right? And I remember sometime, in our conversation, you talked about the work of Phyllis Crystal And you talked about the work that Lindsay has done on detachment. This is what it is. How do we face the situations and events of life? All of them may not be to our liking. Some may come just to provoke us, just to see where we are standing. And but when they come, how well we are prepared to handle them. And when we are detached, we can see them for what it is, and we can, without discrimination, we can we'll be shown the path of what is the right action for it, but we will not judge or blame anybody. You see, when you see the situation without bringing a label on the people as good and bad, but instead replacing it as a teacher and a student, it kind of brings in a completely different connotation. Your response will still be the same, but your reactions will change.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's
I mean,
that's I think the essence of what Santuran was trying to say. That for the first time, he never got sucked into it, and yet he was able to do it with a sense of balance, with a sense of equipoise, with the panache of a ballet dancer, with the skill of a gymnast.
right. I'm glad to hear you call Phyllis Crystal a gymnast. My goodness, she wasn't. I'm sure she was in her day. Yes, but that those cutting the ties that bind, which is the work that Phyllis taught Lindsay, has actually been extremely useful, and Lynn has done it with literally hundreds of people, and I think that's very helpful. Thank you. It also on Saturday you talked about setting yourself free from the barriers that the mind created in certain situations. So if I'm faced with a problem, the first thing that I do is to think about it. And I have always used my mind to try and sort out that problem. But it seemed to me that what you were saying is that that is the wrong way round. And I wonder if you could talk me through a little bit more about that, please.
Can you, Adam, a little bit clarify, your question a bit?
Yes, you talked about um, setting yourself free from the barriers that the mind creates.
Mm.
Now, if I have a problem, the first thing that I do is think about what that problem is and how best to sort it out. But you say that the mind creates barriers to the solution rather than finds solutions to the problem. That is a concept that I find very difficult to grasp. But I know that it's true, but I just wondered how we could explore that a little bit more.
Yeah, I needed that bit of a perspective so that I could do justice to what you were asking. When I say that the mind is actually a barrier while solving a problem, what I meant was the lower mind. Because the lower mind, as I keep saying, has its set of limitations. It has with it its set of library of solutions, which are often not completely adequate for what the problem is presented before us. Whereas the higher mind, or the consciousness as we call it, is actually equipped with every possible solution. So it has far more innovation and far more flexibility and far more clarity than the mind. Because challenge that the mind also has is that the mind is also being swayed by a lot of emotions. The emotions sometimes come as a kind of a veil in front of the problem, and it doesn't allow us to see the solution clearly. Because when we get emotional, we get swayed, we get affected by other things, and we may not be able to take the right decision. So that's why the mind becomes a barrier. And
Right.
if you allow yourselves to sit back and again allow the witness in you look at the problem holistically without instantly jumping into it, without instantly trying to react to it, without panicking, If you were to just sit back, and as the wise people used to say in our times, that you sleep over it, then the reactions of the mind subside, and when you are fresh, the higher mind fully is there, showing you a path, showing you a set of solutions that you wonder from where they come. And it happens with most of us. But in the heat of the moment, in the middle of the storm, sometimes, if we instantly try to do something to close the window at that point of time, we may get impacted by the burst of wind ourselves. But once the window is shut nicely, you know that you can go through the storm without getting impacted. And then you can think through what you must do to be able to see yourself out of that storm. So, this is where we have learned. And with experience, we realize that every time a challenge comes in, instead of reacting to it, you choose to step back and give us amount, certain time of pause to it, allow it to settle down a bit, let the emotion subside, then you step up and allow your higher mind to look at the problem objectively, devoid of the drama, devoid of the story that the mind creates. You'll realize actually the solution is very simple. And then when it keeps happening again and again, repeatedly, you are able to do it, you realize that life is actually quite a breeze. You are able to deal with most of the challenges of life without getting impacted by them. And that's what is the state of constancy that we spoke about in our last conversation. It requires a little getting to it, it requires a little practice. But once you start seeing it, how beautiful it is, and that there's no need of anxiety and stress and working yourself crazy around it, and that eventually everything is just so perfectly comes up, and you wonder, where did this solution come? How did I actually come out with this? Was it me really who thought about it? And then that awe and wonder is very important. That gives you the sense of joy, it gives you a sense of adventure around it. And
Yeah.
you realize you're like a child and you say, you enjoy these things then, and you wonder, and then you realize that how all these come only for a purpose, to make us grow in our awareness that we have at our behest a friend called as the higher mind or the consciousness, which is so smart and so wise and so available for us.
Hmm. Yes. As I said last time, not having to rely on the lower mind to sort out every problem is a tremendous relief. But it's a question of having the faith and the trust to be allow that to happen that I think is the crucial thing. And again, as we talked about last time, experiential learning is the way to trust it.
Absolutely. And Adam, and just to say here, the faith and trust that you just spoke about is really for the initial few times because it's a new way of living. And initially, you need to, it's a kind of a crutch, it's a kind of a stake in the ground that you need to hold on to further on this path. But once you've taken a couple of steps and once you've had these experiences, it starts becoming instinctive and natural for you. In your vocabulary, these words like faith and trust, they start to disappear. They're just initial steps of an unsure mind, of trying to get onto something. And then your experience starts telling you that, boy, it works every time. And this is the stage which we call as the third stage, the stage of knowingness. You just start knowing things. It's no longer about trust and faith.
Right. One of the things that has struck me most about your teachings over these last months has been that in love we are all one. And that is wonderful because when I'm with you, everybody is lovely. You're surrounded by delightful people, and I've got to know some lovely people through our times together. But in the world as it is, not everybody is like that. Jesus said, "Love thy neighbor as thyself." Uh, Sai Baba, love all, serve all. So loving everybody is quite clearly the way forward. But in this world that we live in, there are lots of things happening and going on that make it very difficult to carry out that love all. And while it's easy to love lovely people, it's not so easy to love not so lovely people. And I wonder if you could just explain the best way of trying to do that, because it's something that I'm struggling with some of the stories that we're reading in the newspaper, we hear in the news. The world is surrounded by sort of disasters and dramas and terrible things happening. I don't find it easy to send love to those people who I don't necessarily think are lovely.
Right. So today we were walking. There's a usual path that we normally take for our daily walks, morning and evening walks. When we walk through these hills, we walk through a particular village. Most of the times when we walk, there are certain people who are standing outside these villages, who are standing outside. We don't speak the local language. But I've always realized that whenever I go for a walk, I'm greeted with great joy, and you can see that their faces light up. You see that they wait for you to come. Some of them come out of their homes, from their kitchens, they run out to greet you, and a lot of them, we hug them, and you can see that the love is flowing. Now, I don't know who they are, and I don't care to know who they are. I just know that they are as beautiful a creation of God as I am or as anyone else is. And I learned long time back never to judge people and never to hang them behind certain labels. So because I understand that good and bad is a creation of a mind, it doesn't exist. We all sit on certain viewpoints, on certain sides, and then we start viewing others from a different side. And that's why we always create this whole idea of us and them. And this us and them is the reason why this world is struggling and is striving. And I see everyone as a creation of God, as being complete, and everybody performing a role that has been allotted to them in this life. Because all this so called battle between the good and the bad wouldn't happen if there were no two sides, right? This whole
Mm.
idea was for us to evolve so that we stop seeing everything in a basket of good and bad and we see everything in the basket of love, devoid of all this. So, again, step back and see it not from yourself as body and mind, but see yourself as consciousness, mind, and body. And then you'll start to see the world very differently. And this is what Jesus was trying to say. When Jesus said, love thy neighbor as yourself, was saying that neighbor is the one whose weakness you know. You see, it is easy if when you say Sai Baba, love all, serve all, and you can go out to do seva or service to somebody who you don't know because you are not judging that person and he or she is neutral. You're just going and doing, providing them with food or with clothes or with whatever service or medical service. You don't know them, but your neighbor you know very well, and you either like your neighbor or you don't like your neighbor. And now it becomes very difficult for you because you now know it. Who's knowing it? It's your mind that is knowing it. The mind is saying this person is good or this person is bad. But if you ask your heart, the heart will say, I just want to love. So, how can we start viewing the world through our heart and not through our mind? Because the mind has this challenge, it has this limitation, it has its set of preferences. But the heart is beautiful. It just doesn't, it sees everything as equal, it sees everything as one. Until we are able to, and that's our test, that's what is being told to us that look, we have to go beyond this. And truly, then we can serve all. Because till we are able to love all, we cannot serve all. We can serve some, but we are not able to serve all. But how do we love all then? When we love ourselves first. Because if you don't know how to love yourself and understand that you are an incarnation of love, and you experience that love inside in your heart, and when you do, you will also experience that that same love resides in every other heart. It's just that they have also not learned to experience it and therefore express it. And I have learned that whenever I go and connect with people, They start to experience this love in their hearts,
Hmm.
right? And by virtue of that, they start to transform. Because when I go to them, I don't see this is good or this is bad. I just go to them, knowing the power I carry, knowing that my love will transform. And that's the only way this world will change. I have said this in the past. We have to do this one by one. We have to awaken, we have to light the lamp of love in every heart. And when we go, we do not see any barriers, we do not see any separation. Love goes, love begets love. And in fact, we should be loving those who we think are not being kind to the world. When you send love to them, I am telling you, Adam, they will change. They will stop acting the way they are acting. They are acting out of lack of self love. And so, therefore, they are the most worthy recipients of Adam's love, because if they transform, the world will transform.
Hmm. It's a big ask. I'm in a situation in my life when I deal and I meet literally mainly people that I love. And I'm very happy with that. And I'm very fortunate. I'm just conscious that in the world, as it stands, there are other people less fortunate than me who are not dealing and are not surrounded by people that they love. And so that's why I was pressing on that. And that brings me on to another point that in Christianity, we don't really talk about karma. We don't really talk about what has gone before accepting this life at all. We do accept that when you die, you go to heaven or whatever it is. But the whole concept of birth and rebirth and karma and what you have done previously affects you in this life is new to me as a Christian, or was new to me until 25 years ago. And I must have had some fantastic past lives because I've had a wonderful life. And I realize how incredibly fortunate I am that, and I'm not quite sure why I deserve to be so fortunate in this situation, but I have been. But I wonder if you could explain a little bit more about that whole concept of karma, because to some people who are listening and follow your teachings, this may not be quite as inherent in their DNA as it is in some others.
One easy way of understanding karma is already in your question, where you said that look at how fortunate you are for having had such a good life. And on the contrary, there are so many children who are born while, since the time our conversation started, in the last 20 minutes or so, there must have been at least many thousand children who would have been born in different parts of the world. Now, these children have taken births in different countries, in different economic strata. Some are born in rich families, some have taken birth in middle class families, some have taken birth in poor families, and some have taken birth in abject poverty, that they were born on the streets or in the homes or in the forest. They didn't have any medical aid or help. Some have born with a normal body, some have been born with deformities in their bodies. Now, how come if this was just one off life, if it was just one life where we did good, we went to heaven, if we did not so good, we went into hell, if it was just one life, one episode, then what defines that somebody is born in a luxurious family and has all that one can dream of coming all through the life, and there are others who are always struggling? There has to be something. Either God is absolutely unmerciful, that it will create, or is biased or has preferences. If that is not so, if God is benevolent, full of love and compassion, then there must be something that to explain that how everyone is born with different circumstances and different abilities as well, and different color of the skin. How does the languages, everything? So there must be something that explains that. And that's where karma comes in. What you have done in the past is what you come to reap in the future. As you sow, so shall you reap. And that explains it. And that, if you're doing good in this life also, Adam, you're going to get more good in future. But I am actually telling you that you have to break the cycle of coming back again and again. The whole idea is actually to end this cycle of birth and rebirth. And how does that happen? When you understand who you truly are. And when you understand what this life is about, and when you experience that you are that higher consciousness, and then you get out of this game of like and dislike, and when you just remain in this steady stream of love, is when you finish this game. You have, as we say, aced all the rounds of this game through various births. And that is when you become part of this higher mind, or what we call as consciousness. And this reality called planet Earth, this dimension where we come as a species, where this mind is given, that ends. It's not just this one universe, as we call it. There are multiple verses, which we call it now the multiverses. And that reality, as consciousness, continues. Because consciousness, remember, by definition, is everywhere and is ever present. So, this law of karma is something where no second person is involved. It is all a self regulatory mechanism, because if consciousness didn't have any kind of a principle or some kind of a discipline around it, it would have been chaotic. Just imagine if there was no discipline for the sun to come out at a particular time of the day and set in the evening at a particular time, there would be chaos. So there has to be, when there is a free spirit, energetic realm, there must be certain laws that govern them. And the most beautiful law, one of the most beautiful laws in that, and I talk about it in my book, The Pathless Path, is the law of karma.
Okay. I understand the principle, but I think it's a concept that when you don't know what you've done or you haven't done, and yet what you have or haven't done in the past is hugely affecting this life, I think that is quite a difficult one for some people to get their head round, including me. Although I've got every reason to be grateful for what I obviously done something good in the past, but I can't take any credit for it. But anyway, that's very helpful.
But Adam, just to continue there, at least in this lifetime, you're aware of what you're doing. And if,
Yes.
at least at this point, even what you've done in the past in this lifetime doesn't matter as much as what you're doing at this moment. So, if we can learn to live in this present moment with this awareness, I think that itself will start to disconnect us from the future, because the only way to finish this cycle is that we disconnect ourselves from this cycle of cause and effect.
Right.
So, if we understand that we are pure consciousness, this cause and effect is only a game of the mind, the lower mind, because the lower mind is involved in it. And the minute you will realize, Adam, that your likes and dislikes will cease, and they will cease only when you become pure love yourself and you will not judge anyone as being on the good side or the bad side. At that moment, this law will cease to have effect on you. It will cease. So whatever you've done in the past is all that will come to you. In future, there is nothing, which means no rebirth. And that's what we are coming to that point where we are living with this, where all our actions come from our source of our consciousness, and the mind has been completely taken out of this equation. This is the end game. And that's why this is a very beautiful time, because we are all moving into the last phase of our evolutionary process.
Right. The final thing that I had in my head, again, something that came up in the satsang, and that was that as you take the next step off the ladder, you get rid of the last rung. Frightened me to death. Absolutely a nightmare. I would like my steps to be made of solid concrete blocks 6 foot deep and 6 foot wide, and I'd like to get up one, and I'd like to be able to look back and see all the concrete there. So the concept of a ladder and the rungs being destroyed after I climbed really frightens me. And so I'd like if you could just explain that a little bit more.
I want to ask you, why does it frighten you?
The whole concept of burning your boats and not having something to fall back on and just to be reliant on going forwards, I find very disturbing. I like everything to be concrete. I like everything to be in a situation where I've got my security, I've got things that I know about, and that is my comfort blanket. And the idea of climbing up a ladder and getting rid of the steps below me destroys that comfort blanket. For me, the reason I've asked the question is that I want to understand it better. I'm talking about my entire life of having had that comfort blanket around me. And so this next step in the process, I do find very challenging.
Yeah, I think that's a very beautiful question. It has many aspects to it. This question comes from a wrong understanding of what it means. We start to equate it to our securities and comforts. When I talk of evolution, I talk of the evolution of our spirit and of our consciousness. And you are interpreting it from the mind, and therefore the mind's securities and the mind's comforts. So both of us are trying to experience it from where we are standing and where we are looking at the world. So when you understand that you are not this body alone, you are this body, but this body is housing the true, authentic self of Adam, which is the spirit or the consciousness. And when you start to experience everything through that consciousness, which is what our first discussion, first episode, and this podcast is about, when you start to live that life, when you start understanding that the higher mind and the lower mind can be great friends, and that the mind uh, doesn't obstruct you from living that life. So you start addressing and approaching all that is coming to you in your life from the point of view of being aware that you are that higher consciousness, that you are consciousness and you are not this lower mind. And when you are moving on that evolutionary ladder and you're living it, don't go back into the mind. That means burn the boat of the mind. Don't go back. Don't get tempted to, just because round the corner you're going to be tested again, you don't have to run back and say, no, 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 that was more comfortable. We are saying you have a problem with your heart, and somebody says, we will give you a stent. And you get a stent put in your heart, and you start to, after a couple of months, now you say, no, 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 I was better off without the stent. Now you have no option. You can't get the stent removed, it's already there. So we are just saying that as you move on this evolutionary path, you have taken one step forward and higher. And once you are perched on the higher step, you shouldn't have the temptation to go back, and you close your exit. But when I'm saying close that exit, Adam is getting fearful, thinking, what will happen to my house? What will happen to my comforts? Will I have to empty my bank account? And just imagine, I have created everything. This fellow is telling me to get rid of everything. I'm not saying that at all. Why are you thinking like that? Because this is a defense mechanism of the lower mind. It says, oh my God, don't listen to this guy. He is actually taking you onto a path where you're going to become a pauper. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying, Adam, you are far more than this mind. You're far more than your comforts and your patterns and your what you're holding on to things. Let go of your hold. Experience yourself as this higher being and start experiencing the magic of life where everything starts to happen for you because you're no longer restricted, you're no longer holding on to anything. And you will then be able to actually enjoy your home and your comforts and your wealth and your children much better than you are with your mind. Because I remember in the last podcast you told me that you don't longer think of the pressure that you have towards your grandchildren and your children. Yeah, you
Mm.
are
Mm.
available to do what you can do, but there is no pressure. Earlier, you were carrying the pressure of everything on yourself, right? So, this is what I mean, that when you go on the higher path, and don't go back to your old ways, don't go back onto the path that you have led for so long. And I am not saying necessarily that you let go of what you think you've created. And as you go on that higher path, on that higher journey, you yourself will realize, you will start to view what you have from a very different perspective. Today, the attachment you are feeling for things, it will loosen by itself. And you will realize it, yes, it is there. Last 1 week, I have traveled. I've done about 6, 7 cities. But everywhere, wherever I spent the night, I felt it was my home. I felt all the comforts coming to me because I've realized that when I travel, I just need a suitcase full of stuff, and wherever I go and stay, I get all the comforts of my home. And since I remain so joyous in my heart, and wherever and whoever I meet, they respond back to me with love, I feel that this whole idea of comfort and this whole idea of being surrounded by loving people was a something that I always wanted, but I was not willing to create it myself. And the minute
Mm.
I became that, I realized that I need very little. And in that little, there is abundance. And this joy, actually, I am carrying. This love, I am carrying. Everybody else is just a reaction, reflection, and resound of that. So every place becomes my home. Everybody becomes my loved ones. And I seem to be in a state of joy all the time. So this is how I have figured out that, and now I cannot ever go back. Even if you were to tell me to go back into what I was, what life I led in the past, I can't go back because this is such a higher joy. Why would I want to go back? And so when I say burn the ladder below you, because I'm saying do not go back to your old ways. This way is where the magic starts to happen in your life and doors start to open for you that you'd actually, after some time, yourself don't want to go back. In the initial phase, there is always a temptation of running back.
Mm.
And so when you cut that option out, you're actually you're actually telling your mind, hey, I'm going to go forward only. I'm going to go ahead. I'm not going to retrace my steps back. And that allows the experience to come in. That's all. That's all that I'm trying to say in this. And allow yourself enough time for you to experience this path of experiencing yourself as pure consciousness, and allow this experience of the joy of living this life to come to you. And once it does, you would never want to even go back and even think of it. No fears, no living, no need to be anxious about that I'm going to lose it. You're going to
Aim
discover
it.
yourself, and you're going to
Yes.
discover this perennial source of joy, which is inexhaustible, which is infinite. And this love just is, there is no end to this love. I realize the more I share, the more I keep getting this love. It's so beautiful. It's a inexhaustible source coming from the source, of the source, by the source, for the source.
Yes. Thank you, Guruji. That's very helpful. And thank you for answering my questions so beautifully. I've listened very carefully to the answers, and it's now very simple. I've just got to put them into practice.
Yay!
It's somewhat easier said than done. But anyway, thank you so much. And perhaps we shall talk again.
Yeah, will do. Thank you so much, Adam. Love you so much. You are the best. I just thoroughly enjoy our conversations and I look
Oh,
forward to them.
thank you.
Love you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.